Okay, you all good? Let's do it. Hello and welcome to the B2C Lead Generation Podcast.
You're listening to the B2C Lead Gen Podcast. My name is Daniel Hopewell here with Simon Delaney, and this is episode 72, Lead Generation. Is it a buyer's or a seller's market? Kind of interesting on this side. We normally sort of, try and find ways to help buyers and sellers look for tips, but we're almost approaching this a little bit more objectively and asking who, if anyone, needs the help right now. Is it a buyer's or a seller's market at the moment?
Yeah, so right now I think it's a buyer's market if there's a caveat, if they're a good lead buyer. And we've covered this in other podcasts, where we talk about like the 10 ways to buy leads and different things that you can do. So the best lead buyers, everyone wants to work with them because it's really easy, because all their processes are down to a T. They make sales really easily, as long as the leads are good, obviously, but they have ways of ensuring that. So the best lead buyers kind of get to dictate who they're going to work with, regardless of the quality of the lead seller. And I think this is driven by the sort of mentality that not all lead generators, but some lead generators are just trying to generate leads, and they'll knock up winky wanky landing pages and whatever else. There's still this sort of lag of historical things. Well, it still happens now all the time. Actually, it's probably more winky wanky stuff than there is not, but things are getting better. The thing is, if you're a bad lead buyer, and I've spoken to a few of these, it's not a buyer's market, it's a seller's market, because anyone who generates good leads doesn't want to work with companies that struggle to convert what they see as good leads. So for example, I know a few lead generators that'll get like really high conversions with some companies delivering leads to them. And these companies are the ones that are buying leads from lots of different places. They're using it as a strategy constantly. They work with a lot of third parties. They have all these rules and processes and sales systems and everything else built in. But you send those same leads to a lead buyer who's just stepped into third-party lead generation. So let's say previously they've, generated their own leads or been working off a cold list or something. And they'll struggle to convert them. And it sort of comes back to this point, like what happens when a good lead goes into a bad sales function. So if you're a bad lead buyer, or a bad sales team, or you don't have the right processes in place, and you're not contacting the leads quickly, or something else is happening, the sales process is different to the lead generation process, it is 100% not a buyer's market, other than probably getting your pants pulled down by somebody, because they'll spot like the weakness and as nice as that sounds, and they'll spot the weakness and potentially go after it. There is a point in this though, which is, if you play this out like as a thought experiment, and let's say that lead generators start to build brands, and by brands I mean stuff like the equivalent of comparison sites. So a lead comes in and they work off the best interests of the user to deliver them to the right lead buyer, right? So they come in and whatever it is, like the lowest price or the best fitted product or whatever. And so this lead generation company starts to become the resource that people trust and use as the brand, rather than going to brands direct. Those companies, which is basically exactly what comparison sites did, start to be able to dictate terms, because they have the audience, they have the trust, they're the people. It's a bit like having Facebook and trying to dictate terms to them. You can't, because all the people are on Facebook. So lead generators that can build that brand that actually resonates with people, that gets repeat customers that people trust, and they trust more than the brands potentially that they end up getting the lead sold to, they can dictate terms, and that turns it into a seller's market.
Just to sort of, it's not really a very daft question, I don't think we can answer it, but that's what I'm here for, to ask these things. How are you measuring this? Because you think of like a financial market or something like that, it's very clear there are certain indicators, inflation or whatever, what's happening and you know what kind of market it is. is this like a gut feeling that you've got speaking to people, or are there certain like indicators that think are sort of in favour of buyers or whatever?
Yeah, it's like a qualitative thing, right? Like I basically all day, every day speak to people that buy and sell leads. Not like every moment of the day, but I have a lot of conversations around it. So I see sort of spikes in activity. I'll speak to people about, you know, what they're doing. I speak to a lot of different lead buyers. I get a lot of insight into this sort of thing. And so from that, I can sort of, you know, you can glean that what companies really want, what lead generators really want is companies that are good lead buyers. They want to be able to basically build like a solid relationship with a company. They can just keep throughputting leads to them. Because otherwise, you know, you end up with this like thing of turning campaigns off, trying to find another buyer. They might set pages up in a certain vertical because they've got a buyer. That buyer turns out to be really inexperienced. It's cost them loads of time and resource and driving traffic, and it's just wasted. So they're desperate to find companies that are, you know, well versed in buying third-party leads, and will buy lots of them, and they'll work with you to make sure that you're going after sales, not leads. You know, it's the mantra we talk about constantly. Not enough companies do that, but some do, few and far between. And the lead buyers sort of want the same thing with the lead generators. They want companies who are used to generating leads that, you know, are as good as their word. I can't tell you the amount of, I mean, you know, I used to buy a lot of leads. We used to generate a lot of leads. We used to buy a lot of leads. I would say 50% of all conversations I ever had turned out to be complete bullshit. People could never drive the volume that they said they could. You know, they'd say, oh, we're about to send you 200 leads a day. They'd send 10. The price was always an issue. Oh, you know, well, you know, you're paying £10 a lead. We need £15 a lead if you want either that volume or that quality. It's like, why don't you say that in the first place? So if you can work with companies who are as good as their word and can deliver the leads, this is what both sides want, right? They want good buyers and sellers. And so the best of either side get to like cherry pick who they're going to work with. But it's still a buyer's market because the best buyers still dictate to the best sellers terms, and they work to their terms.
Is this a bit of a supply and demand thing though? Like, is there relatively low demand within buying leads? I mean, not demand directly, but not enough companies are doing it. So effectively demand for the leads. So that's why they kind of force the price down slightly and puts it in as a brand, as a buy market.
Potentially. I mean, the thing is, there's the scale of quality of leads. So what we've almost moved out of, and I think COVID drove it to this point, is these like huge sheds of call centers. You know, we're just rammed full of people, like 500 people sat in a call center that were calling like winky wanky leads or list data, and just, you know, all they're trying to do is get the cheapest data they possibly can, and they've got like a massive turnover of staff and whatever else. I think that model is like dying out, and most of those large call centers, what they've been driven to is customer service. They're now doing customer service for companies. It's weird, isn't it? They just like pivoted their model. So when you see all these, and the thing is, it's on the news all the time, you know, Lloyds Bank customer service is appalling. You know, there's all these people talking about customer service and things. And so it's all getting outsourced to the companies that were previously doing outbound sales and buying leads. And the thing is, because they're no longer buying leads, or they might have like small amounts, it's definitely like concentrated the lead buying into a smaller number of like professional lead buyers. And so when you're not a good lead buyer, it sticks out like a sore thumb. I literally had a conversation like yesterday about it, you know, of a guy I know is a lead generator. Just I'm not just going to work with this company because they have no idea what they're doing. And this is like a new outfit that set up some sort of sales function around an insurance product they've got. And they clearly can't get used to this idea of like buying leads and the way to convert them. It's just,
why would that bother the lead generator? Like, if he's just sending them as a CPO, like, why would he?
No, because the problem is they're not getting the conversions they want, and rather than looking at their own processes, what they'll do is blame the lead generator.
So it's just literally thinking I can't deal with the ball ache of having to like. So it's not like a money thing. Okay.
But this is so the lead generation models we know is like one to many, right? Because if it's one to one, there's no point in building a lead gen brand. You may as well just do it under the brand's own brand. It doesn't help anyone building your own brand and selling it to one company. So if you've got a ping tree with 3 different buyers on it and you're delivering the leads to them, and let's just say it's 33% go to each one, you can see the conversion rates from each one. And if there's no difference in the leads are all being generated in the same way, it's completely random. And one of the buyers is converting at 25% of the others. This is the problem their side, right?
Yeah.
Like they've either not been given the information that the other two have, but let's imagine they have. There's a sales problem. So those buyers are a massive disadvantage, and what they need to work on is like improving their sales process. So that's not a buyer's market. They're just going to struggle. And what's interesting is if you speak to them, it's very rare that they'll blame the sales process. It's virtually always the lead generators, but you can really easily test this. I mean, there's other ways of testing it. In terms of like the conversations you'd had and the feedback and appointments, book and callbacks and whatever else. But let's imagine it's one to many in a lead gen process with a ping tree sending some. You just look at the sales rates of the others on a random process. You can see who's a bad lead buyer. So those lead buyers need to start improving their systems, buy leads better and improve their sales process. But I still think it's interesting, this point of lead generators building a brand and then suppliers being able to dictate terms because of this concentration that we're talking about. Imagine suddenly it's your brand that has this key relationship with the users. And so when you pass a lead over to someone, however that happens, like whether it's into a dialer or an email platform, whatever, it comes with like a recommendation from this company. So they're only going to work with like the best of the best, right? Because the moment they don't, what they're actually doing is destroying the relationship they built with the users that sit under their lead generation brand. If you go to like Money Supermarket and see some like crap I don't know, broadband company on there or something, and then go after it, it doesn't just, it's obviously you feel the impact, but it's Money Supermarket as well. You might even consider going back to them and going, why are you working with that brand?
Yeah.
You've had some awful experience and whatever else. So this is why I think from the conversations I've had, the qualitative research I've been carrying out in minute detail, it becomes a seller's market to lead generation companies that create brands that really resonate with users, that trust them to introduce those people as leads to lead buyers that can offer them a service. And they'll be able to work with like anyone and be able to dictate the terms. And by the terms, I'm talking about the terms and conditions, right? It's like, when are we going to get paid? These are the sort of metrics that we're going to set out. This is the level of quality that we're going to be sending you. We expect this from that. So rather than like, imagine a buyer saying, well, we want a 15% conversion rate, it actually flips. If you're like this lead generator, we get 20% conversion rate on these leads as a minimum. And if there isn't 20% conversion rate, there's a problem with your sales process and you need to improve it. There's one thing with this, I've literally not seen this. There's a few companies that are close to it that are like, getting to this point where they're the ones that dictate terms, because the like quality of the lead generation process and the brand and the way they're resonating with people is really, really high. But this is what I expect to see happen now. I think this is how it's going to play out, exactly for the reason that you mentioned, with this sort of dilution of volume and it being more concentrated into a market, is that if you can pull yourself out of that and work consumer side as a lead gen thing and then push that into a sales function, that's a huge opportunity to turn into a seller's market for those companies.
It strikes me that perhaps the answer to this question, is it a buyer or a seller's market, is maybe not that binary or as much as compared to how I expected it to be, or maybe people listening might expect it to be. And actually, it's almost like not the right question to ask, because it puts them against one another. And we always talk about the fact that actually it's not like you're pitting against each other. People doing it right, whether buyers or sellers, are the ones who are not just doing your old school, buying loads of leads, sticking the course into loads of spam, lead gen 1.0. It's actually people who are working together, forming partnerships and doing high quality lead gen. So it's almost like the question is not, is it a buyer or seller's market, but is it a market for the old school or for like the new way of doing things almost? You see what I mean?
That's exactly the point. Yeah.
Should have changed title. Sorry if you listen through. But,
yeah, we could keep the title. Yeah, but no, yeah, it's exactly the point. I think what's really interesting about it is that how it sort of comes back to brand as well. So rather than it be like this sort of talking of that lead generation model, rather than it being this like get leads in at the lowest CPC you can via whatever method, it becomes, can we build a brand that actually resonates with people, and then that they trust, and we can work with buyers on an equal footing, exactly like you said, to give this person the best product or solution. Maybe that's really what the answer is it's actually those two working together to offer the best product or solution to a consumer. So it's actually a consumer's market.
Yeah. All those things. It's like, it's A or B. Secret answer C.
That's the one. Yeah. It's not A or B. It's C. Yeah. It's a consumer's market. That's actually what it drives. It's a weird conclusion that we've sort of reached with this podcast, because we didn't have this answer that's sort of come out.
I always think these are the best ones to answer that.
Yeah. But yeah, if you push that, what it actually does is hugely benefit the consumer. So you've got buyer, seller, consumer that's in the middle of it all. And that is what great lead generation, great sales, great marketing is actually all about. It's resonating with those people, isn't it? So yeah, it's a consumer's market.
It's a bit like when someone says Lennon McCartney, and then someone snidely responds Harrison, just to sort of, just to kind of show they're more versed in anything. Yeah, I think that's quite a cool way of looking at it.
What's interesting about it is it reiterates this point with the brand as well, because it's like whoever has the brand that resonates most with the consumer, that they trust, believe, presents a product solution, right place, right time, whatever. That's the thing that actually wins.
Sure. Cool. Well, yeah, we've gone off piece, but like I say, I always prefer these ones where we don't plan to, we know where we're going to go with it. It's just more interesting this way. We kind of have a rough question. Now we're going to just talk it through, and eventually we come to something completely new. I always feel like, it's more engaging that way. It isn't like, this is quite more interesting. But yeah, that was episode 72, lead generation. Is it a buyer's or a seller's market?
Thanks for listening to the B2C Lead Generation podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe to hear more from those at the very cutting edge of the lead gen world.